Welcome to Soul Healing for the Empathic Entrepreneur. So it's a group that helps you bridge a gap between your spiritual practice and your business. And why is it important to bridge that gap? Is because as an empath, we feel everything. We merge, we feel emotions, and that is a gift and a kryptonite at the same time. So if we understand how to utilize our practice and understand all of these kind of concepts that we have been studying for so many years and integrate them into our actual business and life, then we can lead a life that is a little bit more in alignment with our own truth and hopefully more fulfilling and more joyful and more peaceful and more harmonic. So today is called, I titled it Good or Bad Energy. And it spawned from a conversation. Somebody asked me, like, is it possible to take on somebody's bad energy? And I know those of us who've been studying the spiritual path for a long time will have your answer, right? Your intellectual wisdom answer. But I think here's the thing. There's a difference between knowing the wisdom of it, the knowledge of understanding, good or bad energy, and this is distracting me. Yeah, good or bad energy, and actually integrating and practicing the acceptance of what we might consider good or bad energy. So what I mean by that, it's like, okay, our shadow side, our wounds, our dark side, our part of us that we may or not be so proud of because we feel like it needs some evolution, some transformation. So that's what I mean by that. And somebody asked me the other day, like, can we take on somebody's bad energy? And in short, the answer as an adult is no. But in the evolution of being human, it is yes and no. Why? Because when we're younger, and let's say we had somebody who, quote unquote, had bad energy, meaning to say maybe they were not use the most supportive language, or maybe even physically abusive, or maybe did actions that were not necessarily supportive of a healthy environment. As a young child, the only thing we know is who takes care of us. And as a young child, we are born with unconditional love and acceptance. So in some ways, we think of children as very vulnerable, which is true in some ways, because we can't necessarily go off on our own at 3 years old and get our own job and house and have somebody feed us. But we're also very powerful because we are so unconditionally loving with the people that take care of us. Think about it. It's like when we were younger, we maybe intuitively knew sometimes when our parents or whoever was taking care of us, were sort of like out of whack. And at the same time, we trusted them too. It's like my dad used to always make fun of my mom, which I kind of knew was sort of funny. And then at the same time, I knew was like very disrespectful, So it was like it wasn't a good making fun of. It was more of a like degrading kind of thing. And so that's his, let's say, bad energy or negative or shadow side. And so as a child, you take in, you're still in that kind of knowing, like, I kind of know this is off, but something like that gets repeated over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden your mental practice and capacity starts to have that same repetition. So in some ways, as a child, yes, in some ways you can take on bad energy just because it is kind of like being in a room, and let's say everybody in the room is kind of looking down and they're tired and they're complaining and they're complaining of the weather, and you put a little child or human being in there. If that's all they hear and that's all they know, that's what they're going to repeat. And eventually that's how they're going to see the world. But here's the thing. When you're on the healing path, you start to, over time, recognize, oh, wait a minute, that's actually not my voice. That thing that sees that, for me, my dad was very manipulative, right? Was very manipulative. And so, I had this unconscious pattern thinking like all men are manipulative, even though I consciously didn't necessarily say that out loud, but I just had this veil of perception of the world being like that. So I had a little bit of a what's the word? I was on guard with that, which can be helpful, and but also can also be not very what's the word? It's not always true. So I'm a good detector for those who can manipulate, but I can't veil that over every single person when they have a slight trait like that, if that makes sense. You know, I did that with my husband for the longest time, which I didn't even realize. You know, anytime he would do something that was slightly manipulative, I would just label him as a manipulative person. Do you see how that kind of, it kind of seeps in this kind of repetition that we've experienced when we were younger. Let me know in the comments if you've had anything like that, where for the longest time, you know, somebody repeated something over and over and over again, and you at the beginning maybe didn't think it was real, and then over time you started repeating the same thing, right? It's kind of like if ever you're a parent and then you start shouting at your kid in the same way that your mom did or your dad did or your grandfather, whoever took care of you, and then you're like, oh my God, I swore I would never like be like my mom or my dad in that way, and then all of a sudden you're repeating it. So the answer to the question, like, you know, can you take on somebody's bad energy, is yes and no. Meaning to say, once we become aware that, oh, that's how it happens, that's how it works. When we're a child, we just are all unconditional, loving human beings that just take in and take in and take in. And eventually, if repeated enough times, we start to use the same glasses that may not be necessarily the always the correct perception, right? My perception of men is not like they're not all manipulative, but I can detect when they are, and also I have to be aware of when I'm putting that kind of broad brush statement over someone when they have just a little bit of that, because nobody does not have the darker parts of them. We all have kind of what I call like a light side and a dark side. So that's the other thing too. Like, we have to all kind of admit to that. And where does that come from? I just explained, you know, in childhood. So here's the thing, as an adult, in some ways, it's not true that you can take on bad energy, because the way things work is that everything is a mirror to what's going on inside. So if you're a woman, okay, and you are chemically altered because of the time of your cycle, right? We all know this, right? Right before we get our period and right during, our perception of the world is very like, if somebody says hi to you, you're just like, I'm like, oh yeah, you know? And if you're like ovulating, you're like, hello everybody, hello the world, right? Does that mean you're a good or bad person? No, it just, you know, is that good or bad energy? It's actually what is happening chemically. So this kind of idea where we can take on somebody's bad energy, yes, can be true when we're younger, but when we're older, whatever is happening from inside is also happening on the outside. So if somebody, for example, if you go to the counter, right, at the grocery store, and somebody's kind of being like what we think is rude or whatever, and we are annoyed with that person, wanting them to be nicer, blah, 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 the only reason why that's triggering us is because we have that also inside of us. We've been that cranky cashier, or, you know, the day that whatever, we had our period, or maybe whatever, we lost a loved one. So we're not going to be all like happy and joyful. You know, we just broke up with somebody. We just lost our job. We're sick. Like there's so many things that are going on. We're maybe not in the most healthiest environment. Like, so then we look at that person and then we think, oh, it's that person. When really it is something that is already true in us, and we're just seeing externally what is existing in us, and that is triggering those old wounds and those old patterns that were given to us when we were younger. So the answer to the question is, can I take on good or bad energy, or can I? It's a yes and a no depending on your age, and depending on the work you've done, right? The healing work you've done, and if you've done work that practices self-observation, then you will know everything that you're experiencing is an internal conflict. All judgment is self-judgment. All judgment is self-judgment. So if we're walking down the street and we're seeing somebody and we don't like the way they're kind of being, it's not that there's something wrong with them, and it's not there's something wrong with us. It's just that we are judging. We haven't come to the point where we have integrated that shadow side or that bad energy in us, where we have loved that part enough. So meaning to say, let's just say we develop a thing. And here's the thing that you guys might want to observe. When you look in the mirror, what do you say to yourself? Most people don't know. And because we are a human race that has first a negative bias, most likely you're gonna like, oh, I hate that eyebrow. Oh, I hate this thing. Oh, I hate my nose, blah, blah, blah. And we say something like that, the thing that we don't like, just watch this, and it's so unconscious. It's so unconscious. We literally will say the same damn thing to ourselves a million times and not even realize. And so when we become aware of that and we begin to love that part, or accept that part, or even see it. So there's different stages. First, we are in the pattern. Then we actually notice, oh God, wow, I have this pattern of like being very judgmental of people who smoke, for example, or whatever, Oh my God. And then we are in we're in the judgment, the analysis, it's good or bad. It's good or bad. And then we are, we can come to a place where we're simply observing, right? If somebody's angry, if somebody's sad, or if you're angry, because that's where it starts. If you're angry, or if you're sad, you're not completely just wearing the glasses and not realizing and blaming it on the whole world. You're not in the judgment of like, oh my God, okay, I'm angry, so that means I'm bad or good. But there's a place where you can actually observe, like, oh, look at that. That is anger. Oh, interesting. Oh, that is sadness. Oh, that's the feeling of rejection. Oh, right. And then the question is like, oh, where did that come from? And how old am I right now? Right? Because we were not born this way. We were not born into, when we were babies, even having thoughts of we're ugly or whatever it is that we think we might have these thoughts of, or we're not intelligent enough, or not worthy, we're not significant, we don't belong, we're not capable, So in the moments we can start to see, well, where did that come from and whose voice is that? And then we can begin to collaborate with that, and then we can start to come into a place where we become friendly with it. And here's the thing, when you start getting to that point, and again, it's different stages, and sometimes it's very circular, sometimes you're in one or the other, or one of these stages. When we get to that point where we're actually friendly with it, then, of course, because we've practiced it from the internal perspective, then we can practice it from the external perspective. So let's just say somebody's kind of judgmental, like whatever, your mom comes over and she doesn't like, the way you decorated your house, right? And she's all judgy about it. So depending what stage you're at, like stage number one, if you're in the pattern and you're not feeling enough or worthy, boom, that's going to trigger you, and you're going to blame mom for just being an a-hole because she's not liking your stuff, Step number two, you're in analysis of it. Stage number two, you're in analysis of, okay, oh, she's judging. Oh my God, I wish she wouldn't judge. Oh my gosh, doesn't she know that she hurts me? Da, 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 da. And you're all in this analysis and this whole conversation with it in yourself, right? This internal conflict. Stage number 3, you're observing. Like, oh, okay, here's me feeling rejected. Okay, here's me getting angry. Okay, here's me wanting to say something that I don't necessarily think it should be said, but I want to say something because I'm annoyed, right? And I don't feel loved. And then stage number 2 is the friendliness. So if we've been working with it in ourselves, next time mom comes around and she says that, yes, we might go through all of the stages, stage number 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but we can now come to a place of like, that's just her own conditioning. Are you guys getting this? Is this making sense, right? So she's not coming in and then all of a sudden infecting me with her bad energy, right? Because I've practiced enough and worked with it in myself that now it's not this external reflection of the outside world doing something to me. It is just an opportunity for me to love an aspect of humanness that exists in every 9 billion of us, right? And then we can come into that place of friendliness. And then we can come into this place of acceptance. So I know when people say let go and be accepting, like that doesn't just happen. It is in stages, like I said. You're just wearing the glasses. You don't even see that you're blaming the world for everything. Stage number 2, you are in judgment of it. Your whole analysis of why it's good, why it's bad, blah, 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 blah. Observation. You're just observing. You're not necessarily reacting, but you're like, oh, this is interesting. Every time I, look at this man, I'm thinking this, or men in general. Oh, that's interesting. Observation. And then acceptance, where it's like, okay. Yeah, I know. It's in the collaboration. This is what I teach all our clients. It's like, can we start to collaborate with these parts of us that have not been integrated when we were younger? And we're reintegrating them. That young child that didn't necessarily receive the healthy or aligned with truth, their truth or their heart, we can now learn how to integrate that part back into ourselves. That 4-year-old that felt rejected, the 14-year-old that never felt seen or heard, the 20-year-old that didn't find her voice, like all of those parts of us, because we all have them. Okay, we're not just one person. Like we have different aspects, different ages. If you notice, also too, it's like sometimes. And especially you'll see this when you're with your parents. You'll revert back to a 6-year-old with your older sister and a 20-year-old with your dad and a 14-year-old with your mom. Like those things will come out, right? Because they haven't been integrated into your being. And so this good and bad energy, it's not one or the other. It's both and. It's both and. So I hope that first point makes sense. And then we can start to see the evolution of this, because my next point is to understand how the brain works. Because here's the thing, we have 2 parts of the brain. Well, we don't just have 2 parts, but if we were to think of our right and our left brain, the analytical part of our brain will put things in categories like good or bad, right or wrong. I like this, I don't like this. I don't like the fact that it's too sunny. I like the fact that it's sunny. I don't like it's raining. I like it that it's raining. And for some reason, if we don't understand that, we just kind of think, we just agree, right? Like if we just think, oh, I don't like that, and that's not good, we just agree with ourselves. Which can be a very kind of narrow place to be, because if we live our life based on what we like and we don't like, it's very black and white, good or bad, right or wrong. But there's another part of our brain, which is the creative side of our brain, the imaginative side of our brain, the playful side of our brain, right? And that part of the brain is curious, innocent, and open to possibility. So, for example, if you're walking down the street or and somebody kind of gives you a nasty look, instead of good, bad, right, wrong, bad energy, good energy, we can simply say, oh, okay, we're just in observation. Oh, there's a person. And we don't know what's going on with them. We have no idea if they just lost their job, if they're just got a diagnosis. We have no clue. We assume, but we have no clue. And this is where the mind kind of like, it's tricky if you're in the good, bad, right, wrong kind of thing, because we put everything in just these boxes, these very narrow boxes, right? But just like if you're in the potential and possibility, then that means, oh, we don't know. And it's not even about us. That's the funny thing. This person's experience is not even about us. But yet, if we have not integrated those parts of us that have not been processed, then we make it about us, or we assume it's about us, or we assume that the external world is doing something to us, when really, again, we're moving through our own internal conflict. I'll give you an analogy. If everybody was on the beach right now, some people will be like, in heaven, they love it. They love the sand, they love the water, they love the seagulls, they love everything. And another person may hate it because it's too sunny, their skin is too sensitive, they hate the sand, they don't like the seagulls, the ocean water is too strong for their skin, like, and they're in the exact same place. So this is why it's important not to just go on, oh, what I like and I don't like. Yes, of course, you could have what you like and you don't like. This, of course, everybody has their preferences, but know it's a preference. Understand it's a preference. It's not what is. And I talked about this last week, and I talk about it all the time. We see things as we are versus as they are. We see things as we are versus as they are. And that's pretty narrow because there are 9 billion people with 9 billion perspectives. And so we can't just only see through our own lens. We can, but it creates a very kind of narrow perception of the world. And I talk about this a lot, where it's like a dog will experience. Okay, so here's another analogy, it was just interesting. If I put a pen in front of a dog, a pen, what would the dog do? Let me know in the comments. What would the dog do with the pen? Right? If I put it in front of a baby, what would the baby do? Tap, tap, tap. I don't know. Maybe they would know if they saw somebody writing it. If I put it in front of a star would just experience it as light. I don't know. In front of a chameleon. And then I put it in front of a human. The human will, if they were learned how to write, will know, oh, this is a writing instrument. Do you see what I'm saying? So the same thing, the same external thing will have a different experience based on the other person's experience. So your experience then is limited. It can't be the only experience. It can't be like, oh, obviously it's a pen. Well, yeah, obvious to you, but not to the dog, right? So it's important to understand the way the brain works and how we have different sections of the brain that will categorize good, bad, right, wrong. And that, I teach this to our clients, is what we want to do is we want to use the creative brain first and then go down into the good, bad, right, wrong. So, for example, let's say you want to go on a vacation. If you go with, where is good and where is bad, you're going to kind of pick all the places where you think you're going to base it on safety. You're going to base it on maybe the flight. You're going to base it on, but like if you've always wanted to travel to Australia and you've wanted to travel to Australia for like your whole entire life, and you've always known that, then you can utilize, okay, so it's going to be a long flight. It's also like, expensive to get there, and there's a lot of stopovers. And you're going to put those in categories of good and bad and right and wrong and blah, blah, blah. But you're not going to base your decision on, oh, okay, no, I'm not going because the flight's too long, because it's too far, because it's too expensive, right? Because we all know at your deathbed, if you've always wanted to go to Australia, that's not going to change. Right? So all of this good, bad, right, wrong kind of didn't really get you to a place where you feel like, oh, wow, yeah, I lived that life and I really lived it in the way that my heart desired. Does that make sense? So we want to go from that place of imagination, creativity, because there's never going to be something that is certain, that is fully safe, that has risk-free, that there's no bad weather or good weather, there's no good currency, like there's no perfect, like it just doesn't exist. So if we kind of live life through always problem detecting, here's the problem with that. If we're always problem detecting good, bad, right, wrong, good energy, bad energy, then we're always going to be looking for the problem. And then we're always going to try to find the solution. But guess what? Whenever there's a problem and there's a solution, there's another problem, and then there's another solution. It's never ending. But if we just know, I want to go to Australia, and it is going to be challenging, and there are certain problems to be solved, then you go from that place of knowing what you want versus what you don't want. I talk about that a lot. There's a difference. People tend to kind of sometimes create based on what they don't want and think, if I know what I don't want, then I'm going to get what I want, which is, I don't want strawberry ice cream. Okay, that's good. But what do you want? I don't want a-hole people to be in my life. Okay, that's fine. But what do you want? I want people who are respectful, who are loving, who laugh a lot, who enjoy certain things. Like, do you see? So with my clients, we always kind of get that clear, because it's a unconscious, subconscious thing that human beings will do, creating from a place where I don't want this, thinking that that's going to get them what they do want. So, yeah. And point number 2, I think it's important to understand, I think this is a good point to bring in, of what it really means to create boundaries. Because here's the thing, when we start to figure out like what we want and what we don't want, who we want in our life, what we don't want in our life, we start to think, okay, I need to set boundaries, right? And then we kind of put up like this electric fence, and we're like, fuck off, everybody. Whoever is like, who I don't want, like, get the hell out of my life. Okay, which is normal, right? But again, it's like this going to like hiya mode, defense mode, and everything and everyone becomes a threat. And then there's little room for what you do want, and who do you do want, because you're so focused on what you don't want. And the boundary setting is not to F off everybody and to get people out of your life. The boundary setting is for your own clarity. It is not to defend yourself. And here, I think this is where boundary setting is taught wrong and understood wrong. It is not to defend yourself. It is to gain clarity and gain truth of what it is and who it is you want to be in this world, and who you want to be surrounded with, and what you want to do. So that when somebody's like, hey, you want to come over for dinner, and oh, you have a very important sacred moment with yourself, and you wanted to like stay home and take a bubble bath and massage and all this stuff, because you're preparing for something really important in the morning that's really important to you, whatever it is. So you have a sacred no to that request of the external world, because you have a sacred yes to what it is in your heart. Like, this is what's really important for me right now. And that person might have all kinds of reactions. Oh, come on, mom. I have a client and he's like, oh, people are forcing me to kind of hang out with them. So like they're literally taking you by your arms and like dragging you into wherever they want to go. No, it's because you're feeling, if we go back to the first point, you're feeling those feelings of guilt, blame, rejection, whatever it is, and you don't want to necessarily feel them. So you think the other person is forcing you, but it's just a feeling, it's a feeling inside of you. And it's also a feeling that maybe you don't want to feel that other person's guilt. So again, if we go through the different stages of what I mentioned at the beginning, the stages of what I call the stages of letting go in the mind, that part of you that is feeling guilt because you're not doing what somebody's asking you to do, is because again, it's an unprocessed, unintegrated part of you. But if, for example, okay, you're staying home because you want to do whatever you want to do, and it has whatever reaction, your mom or your dad or your sister is like, oh, come on, and makes you feel guilty. If you've integrated that part in yourself, like, oh, okay, this was what guilt feels like. Oh, interesting, right? Anybody have parents who guilt them because they're not doing what they're asking, or people in your life? And if you've practiced in yourself, this is interesting. This is what guilt feels like. Interesting. So when it comes up in real life and you are saying a sacred no to that and a sacred yes to what it is you want because you're setting your boundary, then it's clear. So boundary setting is for clarity. It is not for effing off everybody who sucks and whatever. Does that make sense? So when somebody comes into your vortex and you're kind of not feeling them, do you know what I mean? It's very clear for you, like, okay, that's not my vibe, I don't vibe with people who, I don't know, are gossipy or something. So it's a sacred no, so that you can say sacred yes and be with friends who you feel at home with, you're completely yourself with. I talk to my children about this all the time. They're always saying how nice people are, and it's beautiful. But I say to them, like, the most important thing is like, well, can you be real friends? Are those who you can be that you're completely you all the time, yourself with. You don't have to bend. You don't have to shift. You don't have to be anything else other than you. Those are your people. The other ones who make you feel self-conscious or whatever, kind of make fun of you or something like that, you could be nice to them. It's fine, but you don't have to like hang out with them. Do you see the difference? So there's like that. There's the boundary, right? Where we don't have to like F them off and think that they're in the bad group or whatever. They're just like, my daughter's not into people who are very dramatic and, that kind of thing. She's just not into that. She's not into that. She's into sports. And again, I'm not saying whether it's good or bad. That's her thing. She's just into sports. She just likes people who kind of are a little bit down to earth, who laugh, who play. That's her vibe, right? She's not into people who are really into the makeup and the hair and all that. And again, if you're into that, great. But if you're not, no problem. Then she sets the boundary of like, okay, I'm just not going to hang out with those people, right? So I think that's important when we think of bad or good energy, is to understand your own boundaries and why we set boundaries. And the setting of the boundaries is for your own clarity. And so in the moment, because we're really crystal clear, there's no falling into feeling bad or good or guilty or whatever because you didn't do something. And as a mom, like, this is big, right? Because we can always feel guilty for not being there for our kids. But sometimes I have to have a sacred no for my kids. It's like, you guys know this, anyone who knows me, like, I'm really into tango, and my kid might be like, oh, mom, could you please stay home, please? And like, if I've spent a lot of quality time with them and I know I've, done what I need to do for them, and, we've done the homework, we've played together, we've hung out, we've spent time together, I'm going to have a sacred no, thank you. I'm going to actually go to the thing that I know it supports my soul too. So that's a sacred no. Because in that case, I could get guilted, right, in that moment. Yes, of course, if I haven't hung out with my kids and I haven't been around, and you know what I mean, like I'm constantly out and just doing my own thing, yeah, maybe I will want to kind of also, because that's also a priority in my life, also prioritize them too, because I've maybe imbalanced over prioritizing one or the other. But in cases where I know, oh no, like we've done the whole weekend together and we're good, like, we've had our quality time. So now, like, I'm gonna have my quality time with myself and my community and whatever music. So that's the sacred no, and that's the boundary. And we don't get caught in the guilt or the shame or like, I'm a bad mother because blah, 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 or I'm a good mother, whatever. I'm not good or bad. It's just, right? Let me know if this is making sense. I can't see the comments right away, so I'm going to answer your questions after I get off this live, I promise. So if you have any questions, write them in. If you have any insights, if this is bringing up anything that in your life, you're like, oh, it's bringing up any aha moments, I want to hear them. And I think I'm going to stop there of bad and good energy, because it's one thing to kind of understand these concepts, and it's another thing to be able to integrate them so that when good or bad energy, because here's the thing, we can get really caught up in good energy, meaning to say, like, if somebody's always praising you and they like you and oh my God, we can really get caught up in that too, right? Like I teach yoga, and I can get really attached to everyone who's like, oh, I don't really like that class, and oh, I really like that class. Like, those are other people's experiences. They're not mine. And of course, I have to teach based on who's in front of me. That I'm not going to completely be in my own world, but I also have to stay true to myself and not necessarily be swayed and needing the validation of somebody telling me, oh, you're really good. You're good, right? Of course it feels good. Of course it's nice when people validate you, and I'm not saying we should never have that, but if we're holding on to whether people like us or not, especially, for example, when you teach something like yoga, that's tough, because not everyone's gonna like you, and a lot of people are gonna like you. And if we're hanging on to that, it's kind of a very fragile place, because now we're utilizing the external for our own self-validation. So if we've practiced loving ourselves, whether we're good or bad or whatever we've taught, we're thinking we're teaching good or bad, we can stay centered in ourselves and know our qualities, what our own weaknesses and strengths and vulnerabilities, and be okay with both. That's the thing. Like, can I be okay that I don't necessarily teach those very, like, let's stand on our head. I'm not saying I can't do that, but I just don't teach that, just because I think there's a lot of more foundational things to teach that sometimes feel very boring for people. And it's not fancy enough. It's not advanced enough. When really, if like we haven't for our whole life learned how to stand and walk, like that's what we taught yesterday, we're going to have chronic injury 30, 40 years down the line because of the misalignment in our body. But again, like that can be considered this good or bad, the teacher's good or bad because, whatever, they're not as advanced as my other teacher, And if I get caught in that scenario, then I might try to teach so that I'm entertaining my students, versus teaching them what I know most people need to know. It's like 70 years from now, if you haven't learned how to stand in a way that supports your the biomechanics of your body, you're gonna F your knee up and your hip up and all this stuff, right? When that can be prevented, because I've worked with many different age groups, especially the elderly, and you can see how so many things are preventable. So I went off on a little tangent there. but you can see how the good and bad energy, if it's both and. It's both and then there's a place in the middle. There's a neutral. Where it might be good to somebody, it might be bad to somebody, but in the end it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we stay centered in our own truth while being aware of everyone else. So that's another practice we practiced yesterday. How can I be in my center while being aware of you without projecting and putting my energy here and there and there? I want you to do this, okay? Take a moment now, wherever you are, and put your energy in all different parts of your room. Just put it everywhere. Just like, oh, there, oh, and there, and then over there. Oh, and I have to clean that, and I have to do that. Just do that. See how that feels. Now, just take it all back. Like, oh, okay, dishes will be done. Oh, okay. Oh, my taxes will be finished. Oh, okay. Oh, that person that was annoying me. Oh, okay. Like the neighbor upstairs that's being loud. Oh. And you come and you bring it back to your center. Take it all back, all your energy back. And then you're in your center while you observe everything else. Without throwing your energy all kinds of places in the good and the bad, blah, blah. Let's notice how that feels. So this could be a very useful tool in a crowd of a lot of people who have all kinds of energies and all kinds of things that we may or may not react to, and their idiosyncrasies and their psyche and their bodies and their mouths and what they say and what they think and what they feel, all this stuff. Oh, if we're not centered, oh my God, all of it is going to move us and shake us and trigger us. So if we stay in our center and we stay in that place of observation and we stay in our place of internal observation, like, ooh, that person over there is totally triggering me, you know? Oh, interesting. And we're just in that place of like, well, that's interesting. Then we still stay centered and grounded. And there's a lot more to this as I practice with my clients, but that's the concept of being able to be centered in ourselves while in observation of the external world. So, good or bad energy, again, it's not an intellectual trip, and it's like there needs to be some sort of integration process for this to be fully integrated so that we can come into acceptance of both good or bad energy, because it's always one or the other, you know. And again, it's based on our own preference and analysis of what we think is good and what we think is bad. So that is a very limited point of view, you know. And limited doesn't mean like we're unintelligent. It's understanding. Like if somebody came here, last analogy, I promise. Somebody came down on Earth and said, hey, you that lives in Canada, what is the Earth like? And I say, well, there's 4 seasons, it snows, there's spring, sometimes you can wear a bikini, and sometimes you need to wear your winter boots, it's hot, and then somebody goes and lands in Australia, and they say, hey, what's the Earth like? Well, there's kangaroos, it's always hot, there's sharks, there's spiders, there's centipedes in the jungle. Like, do you see what I'm saying? It is a perception that you as a human being have a limited perception based on your experience. So my experience in Canada and the person's experience in Australia is they're not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just a different point of perception. And we have to understand that as humans. When you're living as a human, of course, you have a limited point of perception. Our mind works a certain way, our emotions work a certain way, our cycle of life works a certain way, our chemistry works a certain way, right? So we just have a different point of perception from a dolphin, or from all of the other living beings, from a tree, from the planet Mother Earth, from the galaxy. So if we understand that we have limited points of perception, then we can become curious, what is that point of perception, right? And can I be observant of that, knowing that there's so many points of perception? So yeah, that's what I talked about. Let's recap. We talked about, we talked about a lot, but we talked about good or bad energy. Can somebody give us bad energy? And the answer was yes. When we were younger, we kind of take that in and we start to get conditioned. And then as we're older, if we don't kind of make that observation of being in the pattern, of judging the pattern, of analyzing the pattern, and of being in friendliness and acceptance of the pattern, then we will mistake the external world from what was actually happening from within, because it's triggering that part of us that we learned when we were younger. What else did I talk about? Yeah, we talked a lot about that. We talked about, just understanding like what's your energy and what's somebody else's energy, right? We talked about, what's it called? The way the brain works, right? The brain has that left and the right brain. One that is this problem detecting, like it's binary, good or bad, right or wrong, like or dislike. And if we only utilize that part and we kind of make decisions from that place, there's always going to be another problem and another solution to be experienced, versus coming from that place of truth, of knowing what we really want in our life, in our world. And again, coming from that place of what is it that I want, is very different from what it is that I don't want. We also talked about boundaries and what are the actual, what's the purpose of the boundary. And it's not a self-defense mechanism. It is a truth, the ability to live your truth. And in the moments when you understand, your yes is very clear and your no is very clear. If you're like a vegetarian and somebody says, hey, you want to go eat steak? It's a no, right? Unless in the moment it feels different and truthful for you to do something different. But in the moment, if that's your truth, then the answer, it's a no, right? And you can have a sacred no so that you can have a sacred yes, right? And things can always change. The thing is, boundaries are flexible. They can always shift and change based on your own flexibility, not based on other people's flexibility. So let me know what your biggest takeaway was for this, because I think it's a super fascinating, interesting topic. And it's something that we all intellectually have our point of views on. And as a spiritual practitioner, I think, or whatever you practice, somebody who's evolving and learning about themselves, it's important to understand it's neither or. It's neither good or bad. It's both. And then that way we can live a little bit more in harmony with the way we function as human beings. So if any of this resonates with you and you want to live a life where you have a container, you have a practice, you have strategies to move you through life, because life is challenging, life is painful, all of our core wounds and everything come up. And we have good and up days and bad days and all of this. And we're searching for maybe the meaning of our life sometimes, or we experience anxiety or depression. Then let me know, Jamie, I'm ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call. And all that on that call, we will go through what I call the 3-level clearing. And the 3-level clearing looks at where all of the things I keep on talking about, the imprints of in childhood of what was not yours was given to you, these kind of falsehoods, false truths that were given to you when you were younger that have been kind of running the show and making decisions for you. We will look at that. Where has it been imprinted in the body? Where has it been imprinted in your mind? And where has it been imprinted in the energy? And that is like the domino effect. If we look at that, then, everything else in our decision making and the way we create our life or our business as an empathic entrepreneur, or as an empath, becomes more in alignment. And when we are more in alignment, especially because we're empaths and we feel a little bit more at ease and harmony with life. And life is not always in conflict, right? So if you're interested in being in that container and going through and having somebody by your side to design practices specifically for what you're going through, because, it's been thousands of clients I've worked with now. I'm utilizing all of the tools that I have developed for myself, for somebody who has maybe had like anxiety or depression like anybody else. And I put it and I formatted it in a process where it creates a result where in the end you start to have tools and a container to hold yourself when you are in your own darkness or when you're in your own bad energy, and to see yourself when you're in your good energy. And one or the other is not where we're going, but where we can just be in alignment of our truth. Like, what is our truth? And can we keep that as our North Star in our life, in our business? And as things come up, can I work through them? Because that's the thing, like life, even though you've read all the millions of books, life will always throw you these moments, these lessons to be learned. And it's sometimes challenging to do these things on your own. So when you have a guide or you have a coach, we can do it together and we can process together, because the truth is we don't heal alone, right? I have my own coaches. I have my own containers to keep me in a place where I feel in harmony with myself and life, because that's life. It's not always feeling good and fuzzy, right? And again, it doesn't matter in a way whether it's feeling good or fuzzy. It matters whether we can feel fully integrated with all parts of who we are. So I'm going to leave a link in the comments. There's one for entrepreneurs and there's one for individuals. Check them out. Or you can simply DM me and let me know, Jamie, I'm ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call. And that's it. So I'll see you tomorrow. If you have any questions, write them down now. I will answer them, I promise. Or you can DM me if you have any more like intimate personal questions. I'm happy to look at that with you. And that's it. And if you have any topics you want to talk about, let me know. And thank you so much for tuning in to Soul Healing for the Empathic Entrepreneurs Group. Again, DM me if you're ready for a breakthrough yoga coaching call. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys. Thanks.